The mountain lodge sits silent except for the sound of Emma's breathing. Thin. Shallow. Barely there. Aleandro Valenti kneels beside the bed where his 7-year-old daughter lies, and the man who commands 200 men, who has built an empire that stretches from the casino floors to the darkest corners of Nevada, cannot move. Cannot speak. Cannot do the one thing a father is supposed to do, save his child. The fever came 3 days ago during the blizzard. A fever that climbed higher and higher, that no amount of money could negotiate down. Dr. Morris stands at the foot of the bed, his face the color of old paper. Next to him, the estate physician shifts his weight from foot to foot, sweat beading on his forehead despite the December cold leaking through the windows. The infection has spread too quickly, Dr. Morris says, and his voice sounds like he is reading a death sentence. The roads are sealed with 8 feet of snow. The hospital is 3 hours away in clear weather. In this storm, nothing moves. Nothing. Carlo stands by the door, his shoulders rigid like stone. Enzo is behind him, their faces carved from the same block of helplessness. For 15 years they have watched Aleandro Valenti command rooms with a single glance, move enemies like chess pieces, bend the world to his will. They have never seen him like this, on his knees, trembling, powerless. Emma's small hand lies on the blanket. Her fingers are pale, almost translucent. The infection has turned her lips grayish, and with each shallow breath, Aleandro feels something in his chest fracture. Then the door at the back of the lodge opens. Footsteps. Quiet. Measured. A woman in a black uniform, worn at the cuffs, steps into the room. Mia Sinclair. The maid who has worked in this mansion for 8 years. The one whose name no one truly knows. The one who moves through rooms like a shadow, invisible, faithful, useful only in the way furniture is useful. Her hands are scarred. Thin scars running across her palms and wrists like a map of some private hell. She holds something against her chest, a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed, its spine cracked from decades of use. "What are you doing here?" Dr. Morris snaps. This is a medical situation. But Mia is already moving. She sets the book down on the small table beside Emma's bed. The pages fall open as if they know exactly where to go, revealing handwriting in faded ink, margins filled with notes, drawings of plants with their names written in careful script. "My grandmother," Mia says, and her voice is steady. Impossibly steady. She was a healer before healers became doctors. Before medicine became only what comes in bottles. She finds the page she is looking for. The one with willow bark sketched in the corner, echinacea with its purple petals drawn in detail, feverfew with its small leaves. Below each plant, words in her grandmother's hand, dosage, preparation, when to use, what it heals. "You cannot help here," Carlo says. Not unkindly, but with the finality of a man stating fact. Mia does not argue. She moves to the kitchen of the lodge, and it is small, functional, nothing like the palatial kitchen downstairs. She finds a mortar and pestle. She fills it with herbs from the pouches sewn into the pages of the book. Feverfew. Willow bark. Something else, something that smells like earth and rain and ancient knowledge. Her scarred hands work. Grinding. Crushing. Releasing the medicines her grandmother taught her before the old woman died, before Mia's life became something other than life. She returns to the bedroom. Emma lies motionless, her breathing so faint it seems the child might stop breathing with the next exhale. Mia mixes the herbs with honey. The color is dark, almost black. She applies it to Emma's small chest, her movements sure, practiced, the way someone handles what matters most in the world. "This will bring down the fever," she says. Her voice does not shake. It does not hesitate. Around her, the most powerful men in Nevada are trembling. The head of their empire is on his knees. And this woman, this invisible woman, speaks like she knows something they do not. 90 seconds pass. The clock on the mantel ticks loudly in the silence. Emma gasps. Her small body arches, and then her eyes flutter open. The grayish tint drains from her lips. Color, actual, living color, blooms across her cheeks like someone has turned the light back on inside her. She blinks. Once. Twice. She looks at her father. "Daddy," she whispers. The fever is cold now. Aleandro stares at this woman he has never truly seen. 8 years. She has worked in his home for 8 years, and he could not have described her face if his life depended on it. He knew her only as the one in the black uniform. The one who cleaned. The one who existed in the background of his life the way walls and doors exist. Now she stands before him, her scarred hands holding a book that smells of time and memory, her eyes meeting his with something that looks like understanding. Like she has been to the edge of losing everything and looked back at the void. "Thank you," he says, and the words seem too small for what he means. She nods once. Then she closes the recipe book, careful with its pages, careful with the knowledge it holds. She turns to leave. "Wait," Aleandro says. "What is your name? Your real name. Not just Mia. Everything." She pauses at the door. The blizzard howls outside. The wind throws snow against the windows like it is trying to break through, trying to reach them. "Mia Sinclair," she says. That is all that matters now. She leaves. And Aleandro sits beside his daughter's bed, watching Emma's breathing grow stronger, deeper, steady. His men exchange looks they have never exchanged before. Carlo leans against the doorframe, processing something that has shifted in the world and cannot be shifted back. But what Aleandro Valenti does not know, what none of them know, is that in 14 days, Douglas Hale will come to collect a debt. $22,000 that Mia does not have. $22,000 that represents the last chain binding her to a man who has owned her silence and her scars for longer than she cares to count. What he does not know is that when he checks the security cameras tomorrow morning, reviewing the footage from the night his daughter was saved, he will see something that rewrites everything. He will see the woman who owns nearly nothing, who earns only $78 in pocket money because the rest of her wages go to a trafficker named Douglas Hale, and he will understand the magnitude of what she gave to save his child. He will understand that she gave everything. That she risked everything. That she stood in his home as his employee, invisible and powerless, while carrying a darkness so heavy it should have crushed her into the ground. And in that moment, kneeling beside Emma's bed, with his daughter's breathing finally steady and strong, Aleandro Valenti will make a decision that will change both their lives forever. But that comes later. For now, we must go back. Back to 8 years ago, to the morning when Mia Sinclair walked through the gates of this mansion for the first time. To understand what brought her here. To understand what she has been carrying all these years. To understand who she was before she became invisible. The morning was clear then. No snow. No fever. No impossible choices made between scars and survival. It was the morning that would begin it all. 8 years earlier. The clock struck 5 in the morning, and Mia Sinclair's eyes opened to darkness. Not the gentle darkness of a bedroom at rest, but the sharp, electric darkness of a woman who had trained herself to wake before the world moved. Before anyone could demand anything from her. Before the day could steal what little remained. She sat up slowly on the narrow bed in the studio apartment on Fremont Street, careful not to disturb the silence. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner, the sound like something dying in increments. Outside the single window, Las Vegas was still sleeping, the neon signs dimmed to a tired glow. She had rented this place for $320 a month for the past 6 years. $320 that came from the $1,200 Mr. Hale paid her, which meant she kept exactly $78. $78 in pocket money that had to cover food, transportation, and the small luxuries of staying alive. Coffee. Bread. Sometimes an apple. The black and white uniform hung on a hook behind the door, starched and waiting. Mia pulled it on, the fabric cool against her skin, and fastened the dozen small buttons that ran down the front. The uniform was a costume of invisibility. When she wore it, people looked through her. They did not see her face or her eyes or the way her hands trembled sometimes from hunger. They saw a function. A role. A woman who existed to serve and then disappear. By 5:30, she was on the city bus heading east toward the Valenti mansion. The bus was crowded with other invisible people, night shift workers, housekeeping staff, nurses whose feet ached from standing 12 hours in hospital corridors. No one made eye contact. No one spoke. The bus rolled through neighborhoods that grew progressively quieter, progressively emptier, and then the houses began to change. They became larger. Grander. The windows grew wider, the gates taller, the distance between one property and the next measured in acres instead of feet. The Valenti mansion sat on 15 acres of manicured property in the highest hills of Las Vegas, white stone and black iron, surrounded by security cameras that turned slowly, endlessly, watching. Mia had never counted how many, but she had memorized their patterns the way a bird memorized the sight lines of a predator. She knew which corners they covered. Which hallways existed in their blind spots. Which windows they could not reach. This knowledge had become as essential to her survival as breathing. The security gate opened as the bus approached. The driver knew the route. He pulled through without stopping, and Mia rose from her seat, moving toward the back door with the practiced economy of movement that marked her as someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Her co-workers barely glanced at her as she descended. One of them, a woman named Rita who worked in the kitchen, had shared an orange with her 3 months ago. Mia had never forgotten it. She had never forgotten any act of kindness, no matter how small, because kindness had become as rare as rain in the desert. The mansion service entrance was in the back, past the gardens where roses grew in colors that seemed impossible, deep crimson, pale gold, white like bone. Mia did not allow herself to linger. She swiped her card, heard the click of the lock, and stepped into the cool, climate-controlled silence of the staff corridors. 23 rooms. That was how many rooms Mia was responsible for cleaning every single day. The marble hallways stretched like arteries through the mansion's heart, connecting rooms that cost more than a lifetime of her wages. The library with its floor-to-ceiling books that she suspected no one had ever read. The dining room where a table of solid mahogany could seat 20 guests. The study where Mr. Valenti conducted business. The conference room where men in suits that cost $8,000 sat and discussed things that Mia did not understand and had learned not to ask about. She began with the conference room because the sun had not yet risen and she would not be interrupted. The table was a field of destruction from the night before. Crystal glasses held the amber rings of whiskey that had been abandoned before the glasses were finished. Ashtrays overflowed with the remnants of cigars so expensive they were sold individually in wooden boxes. Crumpled papers lay scattered across the mahogany surface, numbers, names, things that made no sense to her. Mia gathered the glasses first, moving with the efficiency of someone who had performed this task thousands of times. Her hands were different now than they had been 8 years ago when she first arrived at this mansion. The skin on her palms had thickened. Her fingernails had become brittle. The veins in her wrists stood out like dark roads beneath the surface of her skin. She wore long sleeves, always, even in summer, because certain marks never completely faded. The smell of the cigars clung to the room like a ghost. She opened the windows, letting in the cool morning air, and began to wipe down the table. The mahogany was so polished she could see her face reflected in it if she looked. She did not look. By 7 in the morning, the conference room was flawless. She had moved through the other rooms with the same methodical precision, the library, the powder room, the hallway that led to the private offices. She was in the kitchen, returning the crystal glasses to their proper shelves, when she heard voices. Men's voices. Carlo and Enzo. She knew their routines by now, could chart their days like constellations. They arrived early. They drank espresso, black, no sugar. They spoke in rapid Italian about shipments and territories and men whose names Mia had learned not to memorize. She kept her head down. She moved to the back of the kitchen, began organizing the spice rack that did not need organizing. This was the rhythm of survival: be present but invisible, be useful but unremarkable, be there but not there. The new shipment from Brooklyn arrives Thursday, Carlo said. His voice was smooth, layered with accent, and carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The Castellano family is pushing back on the territory split. They want 30% instead of 20%. They want more than they deserve, Enzo replied. Enzo was younger than Carlo, maybe 35, with the kind of expensive watch that cost more than Mia's apartment. Mr. Valenti has been clear. The percentage is not negotiable. The espresso machine hissed. Steam rose. The kitchen filled with the rich, bitter smell that made Mia's stomach clench with longing. Coffee. She had not had coffee in 2 weeks. Coffee was a luxury. Coffee was $17 per month if she bought it from a gas station, and $17 was 4 days of food. The men finished their conversation and departed, leaving their empty cups on the counter for Mia to collect. She washed them by hand, dried them carefully, returned them to the cabinet. The morning stretched ahead of her, filled with more rooms, more invisible work, more of the careful choreography of her days. At noon, she ate her lunch in the staff room, a sandwich she had made at home from bread that was beginning to go stale and the edge of a cheese block she had bought 4 days ago. The other housekeeping staff sat at a different table. They had begun to acknowledge her more over the years, a nod here, a brief comment about the weather there, but no real friendships. Mia had learned that friendships required the kind of vulnerability she could not afford. Friendships meant explaining her scars. Explaining her situation. Explaining why she flinched at sudden movements and why she never made plans more than 2 weeks in advance. At 1 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Mia was allowed to leave. This was not written into any contract. Mr. Hale had simply decided that she had 2 free hours per week. 2 hours that belonged to her. 2 hours that she had decided, 7 months ago, to spend at St. Catherine's Women's Shelter on the east side of Las Vegas. The shelter occupied an old converted hotel, its pink stucco faded to the color of old flesh, its once grand lobby now divided into a small office and a waiting area where women sat in chairs that did not match, holding babies and staring at nothing. Mia had started volunteering almost by accident. She had been walking past one afternoon, had seen the sign in the window, and something in her chest had shifted. She had walked inside before she could change her mind. "Can I help?" she had asked the director, a woman named Patricia with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from caring too much about things that broke your heart. "Can you start tomorrow?" Patricia had replied. Since then, Mia had spent every Tuesday and Thursday evening reading to children in the transitional housing program. 7 children, ages 3 to 9, who had arrived with their mothers, carrying only what fit in 2 bags. Most of them barely spoke. Most of them had learned that the world was not a safe place and that grown-ups were not reliable. Emma had arrived 3 weeks ago. The girl was 7 years old, with dark curls that stuck up at odd angles and eyes so dark they looked almost black. She had barely spoken since her arrival, had flinched at loud noises, had refused to sit near any of the other children. According to Patricia, Emma's mother had passed 6 months earlier. The father was unknown. The child services system was still searching for next of kin. In the meantime, Emma existed in a state of profound silence, as though sound itself had become dangerous. Mia had not forced her to talk. She had simply sat beside her, night after night, reading stories aloud. Charlotte's Web. The Tale of Desperados. Books about animals and friendship and the kind of redemption that only exists in fiction. Slowly, over the course of weeks, Emma had begun to lean toward her. Just slightly. Just enough to indicate that perhaps she was not completely alone. On this particular Tuesday evening, Mia sat in the small children's room with its donated books and mismatched toys, and Emma curled against her side. The girl was holding a picture book about colors. Mia was not reading from it. Instead, she was simply turning the pages slowly, letting Emma point when she wanted to, waiting for words that might never come. "My daddy has cold eyes," Emma whispered suddenly. Her voice was so small it barely carried across the room. "Like ice." Mia's hand stilled. She did not move. She did not react. She had learned that sudden movements could shatter fragile moments. Cold eyes, Emma continued. Like the eyes of the man who came to our house. The man who hurt Mommy. The man with the black car. The room went very quiet. Outside the window, the evening traffic hummed along the street. Inside, there was only the sound of a child's breathing and a woman's heart beginning to beat faster. It is okay, Mia said softly. You are safe here. No one can hurt you anymore. But something cold and terrible was stirring in her chest. A recognition. A horrible, impossible recognition of a truth that she had not allowed herself to consider until this moment. Emma continued, her words coming faster now, as though she had been holding them for so long that they had begun to pour out of their own accord. The man with the cold eyes is very powerful, Emma whispered. Everyone is scared of him. They call him Mr. Valenti. The words landed in Mia's chest like a bullet finding its mark. The book slipped from her hands and fell to the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the entire children's room. Mia's breath stopped. Just stopped. Like her lungs had forgotten their purpose. Emma, still small and fragile against her side, continued turning the pages of the color book, unaware that the world had just fractured. Mr. Valenti, Mia repeated, the name tasting like poison on her tongue. You are certain? Emma nodded, her tiny fingers tracing the outline of a blue butterfly. He came to pick up Mommy once. She was scared. Everyone is always scared of him. The news said he is very powerful. The room tilted. Mia gripped the armrest of the chair, her knuckles turning white. 8 years. 8 years of walking invisible through marble hallways in that mansion, of scrubbing floors while Aleandro Valenti conducted his empire from rooms where shadows pooled like water. 8 years of keeping her head down, of never speaking unless spoken to, of existing as furniture exists, present but unnoticed. And now this small, broken child was telling her that the man who signed her paychecks was the same man who had fathered this girl with a woman he had discarded. You did exactly right telling me, Mia whispered, pulling Emma closer. You were very brave. Her hands were shaking. She could not control them. She excused herself quietly, stepped into the shelter's narrow hallway, and found the director in the office. Margaret Chen was a woman in her 60s with grey threaded through her black hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Emma has disclosed, Mia said, her voice steady even though everything inside her was screaming. Her father. She knows his name. Margaret set down her pen. Tell me. Aleandro Valenti. The silence that followed was not the comfortable kind. It was the silence of understanding. Margaret picked up her phone without another word and dialed a number she clearly knew by heart. Child Protective Services. Then a supervisor. Then someone higher. The conversation moved from Mia's ears to some distant place where such things mattered and could be acted upon. Within 2 hours, the black SUVs began arriving. Mia watched from the window of the reading room as they pulled up to the curb outside St. Catherine's shelter. 3 vehicles. Gleaming. Windows tinted so dark you could not see the men inside, but you knew they were there. You could feel them. The doors opened with synchronized precision. Men stepped out wearing identical black suits despite the October heat. Then the third vehicle opened, and he emerged. Aleandro Valenti. She had seen him perhaps a dozen times in 8 years. Always from a distance. Always when he was occupied with business, with phone calls, with the Empire. He was taller than she remembered, broad-shouldered, his dark hair silvered at the temples. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything she had ever owned combined, and he moved through the world like gravity was merely a suggestion. His face was carved from stone, expressionless, except for his eyes. His eyes were the color of a winter storm, and they were fixed on the entrance to the shelter. Carlo emerged from the first SUV, and the sight of him made Mia's stomach drop further. Carlo was Aleandro's oldest lieutenant, a man who had worked for him for nearly 2 decades. If Carlo was here, this was not a routine matter. Aleandro did not walk into the shelter like a man. He walked like a weapon finally being unsheathed. When he entered the lobby where Margaret had gently brought Emma, he saw his daughter for the first time in 6 months. The girl froze, her small body going rigid. Then Aleandro Valenti, the most powerful man in Las Vegas, knelt down to her eye level. "Emma," he said, and his voice cracked. Actually cracked. Like something fundamental inside him was breaking open. "I have been searching for you for 6 months. Your aunt, your mother's sister, she took you. I thought you were dead." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She did not move. She did not run to him. But she did not pull away when he reached out and gently, so gently, touched her cheek. "You are safe now," he whispered. "No one will ever take you from me again. I promise you, on my name, on everything I have, you are safe." The room held its breath. Margaret stood with her hands clasped. The CPS worker looked uncomfortable in the presence of such raw power reduced to tenderness. And then Mia saw Aleandro's gaze lift. His eye swept across the room, searching, and they found her. He stood slowly. His face shifted. The tenderness vanished and was replaced by something sharper, more focused. He stared at Mia for what felt like centuries but was probably only 3 seconds. She was acutely aware of what she was wearing, the black and white maid's uniform, stained with Emma's cocoa from the afternoon. Her hair was pulled back in a practical knot. She was invisible, exactly as she had designed herself to be for 8 years. Exactly as she had thought she wanted to be. "You protected her," Aleandro said. It was not a question. His voice was quiet, but it carried absolute certainty. He knew. Somehow he already knew that this invisible woman was the reason his daughter had survived. Mia nodded because her throat had closed. Carlo stepped forward and spoke quietly to Aleandro, something about the security meetings at the mountain lodge that had been scheduled for this week, about the upcoming discussions with the council, about business that could not wait. Aleandro listened without breaking eye contact with Mia. "Miss Sinclair will come with us," he said finally. "Emma trusts her. She comes with us." It was not a request. Mia understood immediately that she had no choice, though the way he said it somehow made her feel as though she had been chosen for something. Something that mattered. "I will need 15 minutes to gather my things," she heard herself say. 10, Aleandro replied. "We leave immediately." The drive to the mountain lodge took 2 hours, and the sky grew darker with each mile. Mia sat in one of the black SUVs with Emma pressed against her side, the girl's small hand gripping Mia's uniform. Aleandro was in the vehicle ahead. Carlo was driving. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the wind that was beginning to rise, carrying the first warning of the storm that was approaching from the north. The Sierra Nevada mountains rose like cathedral walls against the dimming sky. The lodge itself appeared through the trees, log and stone, 3 stories of quiet power nestled among pines that had stood for centuries. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the forest. A stone chimney climbed the eastern wall like a monument. It was beautiful in the way that terrible things sometimes are. Aleandro carried Emma inside himself, refusing the help of his men. Mia followed, and Carlo directed her to a bedroom on the 2nd floor near Emma's room. Not the servants' quarters. Not hidden away. A real bedroom with a real bed and a view of the darkening forest where snow had begun to fall. "Stay close to Emma," Aleandro told her, his voice steady again, professional, the tender man from the shelter's lobby sealed away behind walls of ice. She should not be alone tonight. The temperature dropped 15 degrees by midnight. The wind howled through the pines like something wounded. And Emma developed a fever. It started small, a slight warmth when Mia laid a hand on her forehead at 9 o'clock. By 11 it was 102 degrees. The estate physician, a man named Dr. Morris who had driven up with them, administered antibiotics and assured them it was likely nothing serious, probably stress from the day's emotional upheaval. The body's way of processing trauma. It would pass. It did not pass. By midnight the fever was 103. By 1 in the morning it climbed to 104. Emma lay in her bed, small and flushed, her eyes glassy, and Mia sat beside her with cool cloths, changing them every few minutes, whispering lullabies that her own mother had sung to her a lifetime ago. Lullabies from Kentucky. Lullabies about stars and safe places and love that never leaves. At 3 in the morning, Aleandro found them. He stood in the doorway of Emma's room, silhouetted against the hallway light, and watched. He watched as Mia dipped the cloth in cool water, wrung it out with gentle hands, and placed it on Emma's fevered forehead. He watched as she leaned close and sang, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. "Thank you," he said quietly. Mia's hand stilled. She turned to look at him, and for a moment the mask she had worn for 8 years slipped. She was no longer invisible. She was a woman who had stayed awake through the night for a child who was not hers, out of pure instinct and pure love. "She is a beautiful child," Mia said. "She deserves to be safe. She deserves everything good in this world." Their eyes held. 3 heartbeats. 4. Aleandro Valenti, who commanded empires, could not look away from this woman in a maid's uniform who had nothing but refused to accept that nothing was enough. "Yes," he said finally. "She does." By dawn, the snow was falling so heavily that the world beyond the windows had vanished. The lodge was an island in white. The driveway that had seemed so clear 12 hours before was now impassable. The roads connecting them to Las Vegas had sealed themselves shut. They were trapped. And Emma's fever had climbed to 105 degrees. Dr. Morris paced like a man watching his career collapse in real time. The antibiotics had done nothing. The fever continued climbing despite everything he tried. Emma began to seize at 9 in the morning, her small body convulsing, her eyes rolling back, foam at the corners of her mouth, and the room became chaos. Carlo moved to restrain her gently. Enzo stood helpless. Dr. Morris was on his phone screaming for life flight, for a helicopter, for anyone who could reach them, but the dispatcher's voice came back flat and final: nothing was flying in this storm. Nothing could reach them for hours. Days maybe. Aleandro was on his knees beside the bed, his hands shaking, every dollar of his empire absolutely worthless. Then Mia moved. She disappeared without a word and returned with her grandmother's recipe book, the only possession she had carried from the shelter to the black SUV. The leather was worn soft with age, the pages filled with handwriting that belonged to a woman named Eleanor Sinclair who had learned the old medicines in the Appalachian Mountains 50 years before. Recipes for fever. Notes on yarrow and willow bark and elderberry. Preparations passed down through generations of women who had healed with their hands before doctors existed. "What are you doing?" Dr. Morris demanded as Mia moved toward the kitchen, her movements sure and certain in a way that seemed impossible given the chaos. "My grandmother was a healer," Mia said. She was pulling bottles from the lodge's pantry, grinding dried herbs in a mortar with the pestle that had come from Eleanor's own kitchen. The smell rose up, bitter and green and ancient. "I know what to do." "That is not medicine, that is." "Let her work," Aleandro said. His voice was a blade. His men went absolutely still. Mia made a poultice from yarrow and willow bark and applied it to Emma's chest. She made a tea from elderberry and honey and coaxed the fevered girl to drink, holding her head gently, whispering encouragement. The room held its breath. 90 seconds passed. Emma's breathing began to ease. The convulsing stopped. Her eyes focused. Mia continued applying cool cloths, and within 5 minutes the violent shaking ceased entirely. Within 20 minutes the fever broke. The child slept, her forehead cool, her breathing steady and deep, as though she had simply needed permission to rest. As though all she had needed was someone who understood. That evening, as snow continued to fall and trap them in their sanctuary of stone and wood and firelight, Aleandro found Mia alone in the great room. She sat with the recipe book open on her lap, reading through her grandmother's notes in the flickering light from the fireplace. He sat across from her. Not as an employer sits from an employee. As a man sits from a woman. "Where did you learn?" he asked. And Mia began to tell him. About Kentucky. About her grandmother Eleanor, who had lived in a cabin on a mountain and knew which plants healed and which could kill. About her mother, who had tried to leave that life and failed. About the poverty and the choices and the things that had brought her to Las Vegas 8 years ago. She did not mention the scars yet. That secret remained hidden beneath her uniform. But when she spoke of her debt to Douglas Hale, when she said the number $22,000, when she whispered, "In 2 weeks he will come," Aleandro's jaw tightened. And Carlo, listening from across the room where he stood like a shadow, went rigid. In 15 years of serving Aleandro Valenti, he had never heard his voice change like that. Never seen his hands clench. Never witnessed his entire being focus on a single person with such intensity that it seemed the entire room had shifted its gravity. Something had changed. And no one in that lodge, trapped by snow and storm and fate, yet understood that the change was permanent. The blizzard continued through the night. The security cameras never lie. They document everything, every arrival, every departure, every moment of invisible cruelty unfolding in the corners of rooms where powerful men pretend not to notice. Aleandro Valenti sits in his private office on the 42nd floor of the Valenti Tower, 3 walls of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Las Vegas. The city stretches beneath him like a kingdom, lights reflecting off glass and steel. But his eyes are fixed on the monitor before him. Carlo stands motionless beside the desk, his expression carved from stone. The footage begins 8 years ago. A young woman walks through the service entrance of the mansion in Henderson. She is thin, bruised, with dark hair pulled back so tightly it seems to stretch the skin of her face. Her left eye is swollen purple. Her right arm hangs at an angle that suggests old breaks never properly healed. She wears the black uniform they gave her that day, a uniform that would become invisible to him for 8 years. This is Mia Sinclair on the day she walked into hell and called it employment. Aleandro leans forward. His knuckles press white against the mahogany desk. The footage jumps forward. Months passing in seconds. Mia in the gardens behind the mansion, always in the same corner where the security camera's angle is compromised by hedges. A man arrives quarterly, Douglas Hale, his face a study in controlled menace. 56 years old, silver hair, tailored suits that cost more than Mia's salary for a year. He grabs her arm. Her body goes rigid. Her lips move. Aleandro cannot hear the audio, but he reads her mouth. "Please. Not again. Please." Hale leaves. Mia remains in the garden for 30 minutes without moving. The footage jumps again. 6 months ago. Catherine Mercer, wealthy socialite, wife of a federal judge, arrives for tea with Aleandro's housekeeper. Except Catherine does not want tea. The camera catches her cornering Mia in the hallway outside the kitchen. Catherine's phone glows between them. Mia's hand trembles. Catherine's lips curl into something that is not quite a smile. The kind of smile that exists only to cause pain. Aleandro watches Catherine show the photographs again. And again. Hale's voice, though silent, seems to echo, 2 weeks. $22,000. Or you come work off the debt in the houses. 2 weeks ago. Hale arrives at the mansion. This time his grip on Mia's arm leaves visible marks. Dark bruises blooming across her skin like flowers growing in poison. His mouth moves close to her ear. Aleandro can read every word, 2 weeks from today. Saturday night. Either the money, or you pack a bag and come with me. Your choice. Mia does not cry. She does not scream. She simply nods and walks back inside. Aleandro can see himself in the footage from that day. He passes through the hallway where Hale and Mia stand together. He is on his phone. He does not look at her. He walks past her like she is part of the building itself, a fixture, permanent, requiring no acknowledgement. The most powerful man in Las Vegas, blind to the woman trembling 6 feet away from him. Aleandro reaches forward and stops the playback. The screen goes black. The silence that follows is absolute. Not the peaceful silence of empty rooms. The terrible silence of understanding arriving too late. His hands drop to his sides. When he speaks, his voice is barely a whisper, each word carrying the weight of a confession. "I walked past her for 8 years, he says. 8 years. And I never saw her." Carlo remains still. He has worked for Aleandro Valenti for 15 years. He has seen rage that toppled empires. He has watched his boss order executions with the same tone one might use to order coffee. He has never heard regret in that voice. Never heard something that sounds dangerously close to shame. "You see her now," Carlo says quietly. The rain outside transforms the city into something like grief. Water streams down the windows, distorting the lights below into watercolor smears of red and gold and white. Aleandro rises from his chair and moves to the glass. His reflection stares back at him, a man in a $3,000 suit, face carved by authority and hard choices, and eyes that suddenly look like they might break. "Find Douglas Hale," he says. "Find Catherine Mercer. I want every photograph, every ledger, every document they possess. I want the names of every woman in their system. And Carlo, I want this done legally. FBI, federal warrants, every agency that can help them disappear into federal prison for the rest of their lives. Death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful." Carlo nods once and leaves the office without another word. Across the city, on a bridge spanning the Las Vegas Wash, Mia Sinclair stands alone in the rain. It is 11:02 p.m. on a Friday night. 13 days remain before the deadline. 13 days before Douglas Hale comes to collect his debt or claim her body as payment instead. The rain pours down in sheets, cold enough to strip the breath from her lungs. She has been standing here for 20 minutes, watching the water below churn dark and furious. Her black uniform is soaked through. Her hair hangs in wet ropes down her back. Her left hand grips the railing so tightly that her fingernails have drawn blood from her palm. In her right pocket, she has $78. $78. Her phone buzzes in her pocket. The sound is so ordinary, so wrong against the roar of the rain and the pull of the darkness, that she almost ignores it. But something in her, some tiny, stubborn fragment of hope that refuses to fully die, makes her reach for it. A text message from the women's shelter, "Emma asking for you. Can you come visit tomorrow? She drew you a picture." Emma. 4 years old, with brown eyes and a voice so soft it sounds like wind through leaves. Emma, whose father had the cold eyes and whose mother had finally found the courage to leave him. Emma, who had spent the first 3 weeks at the shelter not speaking at all, and then one day reached out and took Mia's hand. Emma had drawn her a picture. Mia steps back from the railing. She slides down against the wet concrete, her back pressed against the cold stone, and she cries. The tears mix with the rain until she cannot tell them apart. Her whole body shakes with sobs that come from somewhere so deep inside her chest that they feel like they are tearing her open from within. But she does not jump. Not yet, she whispers to the rain, to the darkness, to whatever force keeps humans alive when dying seems easier. Not while she needs me. She sits on the bridge for another hour until her legs can support her weight. When she finally stands, the rain has slowed to a drizzle. Her phone has 17 missed calls. All from Carlo. All from a number she does not recognize. The first voicemail arrives at 6:02 a.m. on Saturday morning. Carlo's voice is calm, precise, professional. "Miss Sinclair, you will remain inside your apartment today. Do not go to work. Do not answer the door for anyone except my men." At 6:56 a.m., a federal operation is commencing. You are safe now. You will always be safe. She does not understand what he means. But in Henderson, at that exact moment, 12 men in black tactical gear breach the doors of Douglas Hale's estate simultaneously. They move like ghosts, no shouting, no hesitation, just the precision of machinery built for a single purpose. Enzo leads the operation from the front, his face expressionless, his movements economical. The FBI follows behind with federal warrants that gleam like swords. Douglas Hale is still in bed when they reach his room. He wakes to the sound of doors breaking, to the weight of 6 men pressing him face first into the mattress. He struggles. He screams. His face goes white, then red, then pale again as he recognizes Enzo. "Valenti sent you," he gasps, still disbelieving. "Valenti, tell him I can pay. Tell him I can." Enzo does not respond. He simply watches as the federal agent secure Hale's wrists with handcuffs. The metal clicks shut with a sound like a coffin lid closing. In Hale's office, agents photograph everything. 37 names in the ledgers. 37 women still listed as active debts. Payment schedules. Asset transfers. Addresses of 4 houses in North Las Vegas where women are trapped behind locked doors and told they must earn their freedom. Douglas Hale is led from his bedroom in silk pajamas, his feet bare against the cold marble floors. His neighbors watch from their driveways as federal vehicles pull away. His face is already on 3 news channels before the sun fully rises. At 8:17 a.m., Catherine Mercer sits at a table at the country club, her mimosa untouched, her diamonds catching the light. She is telling a story about the charity gala next month. Her friends laugh at exactly the right moments. She feels powerful. The FBI agents walk through the dining room like they own it. Catherine's story trails off. The fork in her hand trembles slightly. An agent leans down and whispers something in her ear. Catherine's face goes absolutely white. She starts to protest, to explain, to invoke her husband's position and her family's name. None of it matters. The handcuffs click shut at 8:19 a.m. in front of 32 witnesses. Her arrest is on the news by 8:27 a.m. Conspiracy to human trafficking. Extortion. Racketeering. The photographs of her being led from the country club, her face twisted in shock and denial, become the lead story on every local station. By noon, her assets are frozen. By evening, her society friends have begun distancing themselves through carefully worded statements about being shocked and devastated. Catherine Mercer's world, the one she built on cruelty and blackmail, collapses in less than 12 hours. The federal courthouse in downtown Las Vegas is surprisingly quiet on Monday morning. The sentencing hearing lasts 90 minutes. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel in her eyes, listens to the evidence. She hears the names of 37 women read aloud. She hears the recorded testimony of 4 of them describing what they endured. She listens to the defense attorneys argue for leniency. Then she announces the sentences. Douglas Hale receives 40 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. He will die behind bars. Catherine Mercer receives 35 years. Same facilities. Same outcome. When the judge reads the numbers, Hale weeps. Not the tears of a man facing justice, but the tears of a predator finally caged. Catherine's face freezes into something like a sculpture, beautiful and hollow and utterly devoid of humanity. The bailiffs lead them both away. Aleandro watches from the gallery. He sits perfectly still, his face revealing nothing. But beside him, Mia Sinclair wears a simple blue dress, not black. Not the uniform of invisibility. When the sentence is read, her hand finds his. His fingers close around hers. "It is over," he says quietly. "You are free. All debts are forgiven. All records destroyed. There is nothing left to owe." Mia cannot speak. She simply holds his hand and cries silent tears that fall like a benediction, like a prayer answered after 8 years of silence, like water finally quenching a thirst she had carried for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be unbroken. What changed everything was a man finally choosing to see. 6 months after the federal courthouse sealed Douglas Hale and Catherine Mercer into cages of their own making, Mia Sinclair stood in an office on the 34th floor of a glass tower in downtown Las Vegas, looking out at a city that no longer terrified her. The office was hers. Her name was on the door. Foundation Director, the placard read. The Sinclair Foundation for Invisible Survivors. Aleandro had created it 2 weeks after the sentencing, but he had given it to her, not as a gift to be grateful for, but as a tool to be wielded. The difference mattered more than she could say. She wore a charcoal suit today, tailored, expensive, the kind of fabric that did not exist in her old life. Her hair was pinned back in a way that showed her face fully, without apology. No black uniform. No downcast eyes. The woman looking back at her from the mirror was someone she was still learning to recognize. The morning light caught the edges of the office, polished wood, leather chairs, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. On her desk sat a folder containing 6 applications from women seeking shelter, seeking help, seeking a life that did not include fists or chains or the taste of their own blood. She had read each application 3 times. She knew their stories like they were her own, because in some essential way, they were. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carlo, Aleandro's most senior lieutenant, a man whose loyalty ran deeper than blood. The words were brief: "Emma is asking when you will visit. She has drawn you another picture." Mia smiled despite the tightness in her chest. Emma. The little girl who had stopped breathing in a mountain lodge, whose life had hung on recipes and desperation and hands that refused to fail. The girl who had learned to laugh again. She gathered her things and left the office at 3:05 in the afternoon. The elevator descended in silence, that particular quality of quiet that exists only in expensive buildings where the air itself has been conditioned to be still. At ground level, a black SUV waited. Not because Aleandro commanded it, but because he had quietly arranged for Mia to be safe. She had learned the difference between control and protection. The first takes away choice. The second honors it. The drive to the Valenti mansion took 14 minutes. She counted them like she used to count her last dollars, measuring time as a resource that could be spent or wasted. This time, every second felt precious. The early November air pressed against the windows, carrying with it the smell of desert scrub and the city's electric hum. The mansion appeared like it always did, vast, iron-gated, the kind of home that existed separate from ordinary life. But when Carlo opened the door, his weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. She felt the shift. She was no longer arriving as staff. She was arriving as chosen. "She has been waiting since school ended," Carlo said, his voice like gravel warming in the sun. 3 drawings. 3. Of what? Mia asked, though she already knew. Of you. In each one, you are taller than the house. They found Emma in the library on the 2nd floor, curled into a high-backed chair with paper spread across a small table. The girl was 7 now, no longer the skeletal thing who had arrived 8 months ago. She had filled out. Her dark eyes, Aleandro's eyes, held light instead of fear. When she saw Mia, she launched herself across the room. "You came," Emma said, her voice still carrying the small child wonder of someone learning that promises are sometimes kept. "I always come," Mia replied, catching the girl and lifting her onto her hip, something she never would have dared when she was invisible. "Always, Emma. Every time. Even when you are sad." The question landed like a stone in still water. Mia set Emma down and knelt to her eye level. "Even then. Especially then. Because on sad days, I need you." Emma nodded with the seriousness of a child who understood loss deeply. She had been living with sadness longer than most adults. She had earned the knowledge of it. She took Mia's hand and led her to the table, pointing to 3 drawings with the pride of an artist revealing her work. In each one, Mia stood impossibly tall, a figure that reached toward the ceiling. In the first, they were standing outside together, stick figures rendered in green and blue. In the second, they were cooking, steam rising from a pot in careful swoops of crayon. In the third, they were in Emma's bedroom, reading, and the book was drawn with such detail that Mia could see it was meant to be the grandmother's recipe book. "I wanted to draw you how you really look," Emma said. "Not small. Not like you are hiding. Big. Like you are everywhere and nothing can make you go away." Mia's throat closed. She pulled Emma against her chest and did not speak for a long moment, breathing in the girl's shampoo, feeling the solid weight of her, the undeniable presence of a child learning safety. The sound of footsteps on marble arrived before Aleandro did. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one a statement of arrival. When he appeared in the library doorway, he wore a dark suit, his white shirt open at the collar, his wrist heavy with the gold watch that cost more than Mia's first year of salary. But his eyes went soft when they landed on the two of them together. "We have been waiting," Carlo said quietly, stepping back from the doorway to give them privacy, a gesture that had become habit. In 15 months of knowing Mia, Carlo had watched something in his employer transform. The ice had not thawed so much as found purpose. Aleandro's coldness now protected instead of consumed. "I can see that," Aleandro replied, his voice steady and sure, like an oath being made. Emma pulled away from Mia and ran to her father. He caught her without hesitation, lifting her with the ease of a man who no longer hesitated to show affection. "What have we here?" he asked her, already knowing. "Always knowing. Always asking anyway." "Mia is tall in my drawings," Emma said. "Because she is the strongest person I know." Aleandro's jaw tightened. He looked at Mia over his daughter's shoulder, and in that single glance, she saw 6 months of watching from a distance, of sending flowers with no name, of having her car paid off without acknowledgement, of creating scholarships in her name at shelters across the state. She saw a man learning to see her not as an employee or a debt or a rescue, but as a person worthy of regard. After Emma fell asleep at 8 o'clock, worn out from showing Mia every corner of her life, every toy she had collected, every small kindness the world had offered since the blizzard, Mia found herself alone with Aleandro in his study. The room smelled like leather and old wood, like the past carried in careful containers. "May I show you something?" he asked, moving to a cabinet against the far wall. He opened a drawer and withdrew a photograph. In it, a woman with dark hair stood on a beach somewhere bright. She was holding a baby. She was smiling at the camera like the world was a place worth trusting. "My wife," Aleandro said. "Elena. And Marco, our son." This was before he was born. Before everything. He set the photograph down carefully. "My brother took this photograph. 3 years later, he sold information to the Santoro family about my movements, about my guard rotations, about the people I loved. 5 men died because of his betrayal. Elena was pregnant with our second child. The violence during the retaliation, the stress was too much for her body. She miscarried. And then, 2 months later, she simply did not wake up. Her heart was broken in a way that medicine could not repair." Mia said nothing. In the silence, she heard the weight of it, the kind of loss that becomes the foundation of a person's entire architecture. "I sent my brother to prison," Aleandro continued, his voice hollow as a church with all the faith gone out of it. "I told myself it was justice. But the truth is uglier. I simply could not bear to look at him anymore because he was a mirror. He showed me that I had failed to protect the only person who mattered. And when he died 3 months into his sentence, I did not mourn. I felt relieved." He turned to face Mia fully. The firelight caught the scar that ran from his right eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of violence survived. "For 15 years, I told myself that mercy was weakness. That love was a liability. That the only way to keep people safe was to control them completely, to see them as assets instead of souls. And then a blizzard came, and a girl with $78 in her pocket saved my daughter with a recipe book and hands that refused to fail. And I realized that I had been wrong about everything that mattered." He moved closer to her. Not threatening. Not commanding. Simply approaching with the vulnerability of a man who had decided to risk. "I have watched you these 6 months," he said. "I gave you the foundation because I wanted you to have power, not because I expected gratitude. I sent you flowers because you deserve beauty in your life, not because I wanted to own you. I paid your debts because they were never yours to carry. And every single day, I waited to see if you would stay. Because I had to know that you were choosing to be here, not trapped by circumstance again." Mia's eyes filled with tears that fell silently, the way tears fall when the body is too overwhelmed for sound. "I choose to be here," she whispered. "I choose you. Not the money or the power. You. Aleandro. The man who learned to see. He kissed her then, by the fireplace where she had once saved his daughter's life, where mercy had finally met power and broken something open that had been sealed shut for 15 years. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. After the rain, the sky clears, he said, repeating the words her grandmother used to say when Mia was small enough to believe them. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. 3 weeks later, on a morning when the first real snow was falling, Mia woke in the master bedroom of the mountain lodge. The window looked out at white-covered pines, at a landscape that held no memory of violence or desperation. Beside her, Aleandro slept, his breathing deep and even, his hand still resting on her waist even in unconsciousness. She thought of the woman she had been, invisible, scarred, counting her last dollars like they were prayers. She thought of the moment she had decided that saving Emma mattered more than her own safety. And she thought of the man beside her, learning that true strength was not in control but in the courage to see people clearly. Emma would arrive this afternoon with Carlo's wife, who had become something like a grandmother to the girl. Tonight, they would make cookies using recipes from the book that had saved a life. Tomorrow, Mia would return to her foundation office and read 6 more applications from women who believed they were invisible. But for now, in the quiet of early morning, she simply lay beside the man who had finally learned to see, and let herself be seen in return. The coffee Aleandro brought to the room at 7 in the morning was still hot. The sky outside had cleared. After the rain, after the darkness, after 8 years of being invisible, Mia Sinclair had become a woman who stood tall enough to reach the ceiling. She had become a woman who mattered. And she had learned that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is simply being truly, finally, completely seen. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.